The journalist at the Moscow Times, Jake Cordell. Jake, we've been worrying about you, actually. And the rules have changed about free speech in Russia, and you simply weren't feeling able to do your job anymore. So you fled. Tell us your decision and where you're talking to us from this morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, so actually, like many journalists, Russian and foreign, the situation in Russia deteriorated quite quickly since the start of the war. I think quicker than most people expected. There was pressure on independent media reporting. First of all, there were laws that you can't say the word war or invasion to talk about Russia's war and invasion of Ukraine. And then I think over the weekend, a law was passed which basically criminalized the use of non-official sources to talk about the war. So basically, if you want to talk about the war in your reporting from Russia, you have to use only official government sources. And as we know, official government sources in Russia are giving nowhere near the full picture of what's going on. They're still talking about this being a liberation special military operation limited to the Donbass. So mainly it was Russian journalists who decided that they needed to move abroad to be able to continue working independently, or if they stayed in Russia, they simply stopped their reporting of the military side of the war. Many foreign journalists also left and now reporting from overseas. And the idea is to wait and see what happens with this law. Like many laws in Russia, it's unclear how this will exactly be implemented. And there are still foreign journalists reporting in Russia, but quite a lot made the decision that, at least for the short term, it was better to move abroad, see how this panned out, and then potentially return later when we know what's going on.
But Jake, in the meantime, what is the fate of the Moscow Times? Do you compile the Moscow Times from London or from outside Moscow, or does it still continue in some form in Russia?
No, so Moscow Times is online-only publication, so it continues from as before. If you go on our website now, you'll see we have live blog of all the updates. We have reporting done by our correspondents from outside the country. You know, the coronavirus pandemic was quite good at getting people used to, doing lots of stuff online, reporting online, talking to sources online over messages and stuff. So that's able to continue, but almost basically interrupted.
What are you reporting on? What can you actually do that people in Russia will not know about?
So, well, lots of people in Russia won't know about the extent of the military campaign. And there's really only so much independent media can do to break through that, because 2/3 of Russians rely only on state TV for their news. Now, that may be changing, because as we see, the Russian government has started to give a little bit more clues as to the extent of the military effort. So they've said that they've lost about 500 soldiers. The real toll is probably a lot higher than that. They've also said yesterday, for the first time, they're using conscripts in the fighting. So these are 18, 19-year-old boys, men doing their military service. So there is a feeling that perhaps, as the Russian government starts to admit that the campaign is a little bit bigger than they first thought, Russians may then turn to other sources of information to try and find out what exactly is going on. And when they do that, of course, they'll be turning mainly to Russian independent news, which does exist. But as I say, 2/3 of Russians rely only on state TV, and they're getting a very limited picture of what's going on. So in terms of talking to the Russian public and explaining what's going on, you're really looking mainly at an urban, liberal, educated class in the cities as the kind of target audience for independent journalism in Russia at the moment.
And Jake, look, like Eamon and I, journalists are a well-connected bunch. You'll have lots of journalist friends still in Moscow. Are you hearing stories about people, worried for their own safety? And as you say, the sort of urban intellectual elite that does follow a bit of Russian independent news, that is going to be severely hampered by these rules.
Yes, for sure. And we're seeing a big exodus. We talk about a few journalists, but the real exodus from Russia right now is taking place among that class. People who work in IT companies, kind of young, middle class, wealthy families. They really kind of don't see a future in Russia anymore and are leaving as well. And, you've seen all the airspace bans that have been hit with Russia. So if you want to look how much flight tickets are, you'll see how strong the demand is right now to leave Russia. In terms of the reporters that are going on the ground, I think the main concern is for Russian reporters who are staying in Russia. The Kremlin has pushed down very hard on Russians. It's labeled them foreign agents. It conducts searches of their apartments. It puts them on registers. It follows them around. It intimidates them and their sources. So the main concern is there. Foreign journalists have not been off limits, but there's been a sense that they're not as important for the Russian government to worry about. However, we saw with this new law that criminalizes the use of non-government sources, specific comments from the government that it would include foreign correspondents. And I think that is a bit of a shift. It's quite a big shift from what's gone on before. As I said, it depends how laws are going to be enforced. Russia has a system where it kind of creates a legal system where you can never be 100% compliant, so that it can always find something to kind of push against you. So we really are now just waiting to see how this law is used. It hasn't yet been used. There hasn't been any open cases yet. So we're waiting to see what happens with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one last question, because we've been talking a lot about what the impact of the sanctions will be, and all these Western companies, the likes of McDonald's, Starbucks, pulling out. The big concern is that actually it will increase anti-Western sentiment amongst Russians, who actually won't blame Putin, but will see it as being bullied by the West. And I wondered if you just had a take on that, given your contacts back in Moscow.
I think that's right. I think it divides how you'd expect it to divide. If you're anti-Kremlin and you're pro-Western anyway, and you're living in Moscow and you see that McDonald's is closing, IKEA is closing, you can't get Starbucks anymore, Apple's not working, you can't buy an iPhone, you're going to be more anti-Kremlin. You're going to blame the Kremlin for what's going on. You're going to see that this is a response to the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. If you're living out of the cities, you don't particularly go to McDonald's anyway, you don't have a McDonald's in your town, you don't use Western technology, you are going to be fed the propaganda that this is the West ganging up on Russia, and the anti-West sentiment is very strong in Russia anyway, and that's only likely to harden. Question is, as people notice when they go to the supermarkets that their food's becoming 20% more expensive in a week, which is already happening, now they may blame the West for that, but they're also going to blame their government for maybe not doing enough to sort them out. So how that develops over the next few weeks, it could be a hardening of both anti-West and anti-government sentiment.